Hello, everybody, and welcome to CLCI Live every Tuesday.
Welcome in. As we embark on this journey through CLCI Live and our topic, I just want to invite everybody out there watching to please participate in the conversation. We are monitoring our chat and our Facebook, and we're up on Facebook and YouTube. So that is why we do this live, so we can hear from you and interact with you. So please, we would love to have you join in the conversation. And we'll answer your questions afterwards. And before we even do that, please take a moment and click that follow and subscribe button. Do it. Smash it. Tell your friends about it, please. It shows us support and also keeps us doing these kind of things. So that is all for me. I'll let you guys take over from here. Hi there, Joy and Success.
Hi, Steve.
Hello.
Hello, and Anna Morozova, who commented on some different video, I think.
By the way, I see our title says 101, but this is Balance 101. So I just want a little reminder of that, that we're talking about Balance 101 today.
Balance 101 colon consumption versus creativity?
Yes, consuming versus creating, or consumption versus creativity, whichever way you want to say it. Let's talk, shall we? So moving into this, by the way, I'm here to just ask questions and learn from all of y'all. So what are we talking about when we are saying consuming? When we're talking about, let's talk about the first piece of this, is consumption. What do we mean? Are we talking about eating food?
So I think about
Yeah, we could talk about that. Like we're using that as a metaphor to just describe everything else that goes with consumption. That's a little more, what's the word? Not literal, like media consumption.
You're defining consumption with consumption. So can you?
Yeah, we're incorporating, we're integrating, we are absorbing. I'm coming up with other metaphors, I guess, to describe the same thing. But you're taking something in and you're doing something with it. Consumption isn't taking something in and not doing anything with it. I don't know what you would call that. And it's not destruction either, which would be the opposite of creating, is destroying. Consumption, you are incorporating somehow the thing that you're taking in and doing something with it. So
wait,
for food...
Hold on.
Yeah.
You think that consumption means that it has to have something done with it? You can't just mindlessly consume and then do nothing with it?
Can you provide me an example of where that is the case? Because I
watch Family Guy and I mindlessly consume that information.
Okay. Why?
I can mindlessly scroll. I can mindlessly eat. I can mindlessly consume probably anything.
I dare say you can mindlessly nothing. Otherwise, you are not alive.
I don't think that is the case, because you're still doing something with the information that's being taken in. Otherwise, you're not consuming it. It's just like in the background. It's noise. It's not something that's actually being consumed.
So you don't deem it consuming?
I don't deem that consuming. And I think my opinion is the final one on that.
You have to actively be consuming, choosing to actively consume.
Yeah, because when you're being literal consuming, you're eating something. Your body is doing something with the information. When we're talking about consuming in this circumstance, we're talking like mental consumption. You're consuming some sort of media or whatever in your brain, or your psyche, or however you want to describe it, is still doing something with the information, even though you're not creating.
So, I mean, can we subconsciously consume?
Yes, I think that happened. Yeah. Isn't there a study that suggests you can learn in your sleep if you put on something in the background? Yeah.
Really?
I think that even one of the things that come to mind when we talk about subconscious consumption, and it's an argument to be saying it is what we are saying consumption is, or in this case, what we are discussing consumption to be, but that have you ever heard of sleep hypnosis or drive hypnosis? Drive hypnosis.
Mm-hmm.
When you're driving and you get to your
Yeah.
destination, you don't remember how you got there.
Yeah.
We probably on the way sort of subconsciously consumed a lot of things to get ourselves there, but we just really didn't retain what that is. I think it's interesting too, because if anybody has studied learning and the learning process, it takes a lot of times for us sleep, for us to go to bed and wake up, for us to fully commit and process things to our memory and our brain. And sometimes, so it's almost like a requirement for us to learn is for us to sleep at the end of the day, which I find very interesting. So I think we can consume without awareness, like, you know, we can blindly sort of, but I think it would be remiss for us to think that it isn't having an effect on our brain in some capacity. I would guess, of course, without the scientific evidence, because I'm a slacker who didn't do research today. So when we're saying consumption, I think the first thing that comes to mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, I would guess for us is, especially in this day and age, is consumption of media.
Mhm.
Consumption of, and media, let's define media. How about that? Because I know certain things come to mind, but it might be a broader spectrum.
Any medium of information that's being transmitted from one person to another. The broadest definition I can give.
Mhm.
I would guess that people's first thought is they think like social media, they think internet, they think news articles and TV.
Books.
But I mean, media extends to books as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, it extends to a lot of things.
Audio, podcasts.
Mhm.
And that and by consuming, it's us watching, partaking in, reading, looking at, interacting with.
Yeah.
So
How would you guys rate yourselves on your media consumption?
Oh,
How-
that's a good one.
Versus and we'll get into
What's the rating?
create. Yeah, we'll get into creativity versus creativity or creation, but what
how
do
are
you
we
guys-
measuring this scale? What is the scale of measurement? You say rate
Yeah.
yourself. Are we rating ourselves good, bad, a lot, a little,
qualitatively?
qualitative? So
Just
how much?
you can rate yourself however you want, Brooke.
So on a scale of 1 to 10,
If that's the way you want to rate yourself, Jen, I will allow it.
That's hard because I feel like everything is media, so I'm always
yeah.
on some
yeah,
level I'm always consuming, even when I'm creating. I'm consuming.
How much are you consuming of?
I mean, every day I'm alive, I'm awake, my eyes are open. I'm consuming. Yeah, you know what I mean. I'm listening.
So it's kind of like you just can't at this point in time. Like people can't really even escape it because it's constantly.
There's
Yeah.
a constant
Happening.
barrage, right?
It's
Yeah.
ubiquitous. It's everywhere.
I think that's why this concept of deep work becomes so important. Like literally taking the moment to like shut down distraction, shut down other things. You know, sit in a room and create.
Actively consuming, actively creating. That would be, I think, along the path of deep work.
It's
Joint
weird.
Success noted that we're their media.
Yeah.
We're
Nice.
currently creating right now other media for people to consume.
Which is funny because, you know, I think I've defined myself as a creator in so many ways, but it's definitely evolved as I have got, you know, through my life, the different forms of creation and creativity. So we've talked a little bit about consumption. Let's talk about creativity because I have a really broad definition of creativity. And I'm curious to know what yours are before I usurp the conversation and give you mine. So
Jerome,
Go
can you
on.
define creative?
I would say what I think of when it comes to creating, I think of giving, to keep it simple, as opposed to consumption. I think that's something in the realm of taking. But you do have to consume to be able to create. So I think it is whatever knowledge you've consumed or whatever it is that you've consumed, that's you now regurgitating that and giving, whether that's in a different way, something different than how you've consumed it, more creatively than what you intook, or just giving right back out. I still think they're all in the same. I think it's still you creating. You're creating just at a different point.
Kyle, were you talking? I feel like, did I hear you earlier?
No, that was Jerome that was talking.
Oh, oh, geez.
So what else? What are your definitions of creating, or creating?
So I have a list of my definition. It's like a bunch of different words. If you're interested.
Do it.
Okay.
Let's hear. Of course.
Tell me more.
So for me, creating is applying, practicing, incorporating, integrating, processing, dissecting, refining, and enhancing. Any of that is what I would consider creation for me. Anthony looks skeptical.
Well, some of it sounds like it could be part of the consumption process, which consumption can be a part of the creative process, and it's probably a necessary part of it. But I don't know if the integrating and processing is a necessary part of creativity, because it could that could be its own thing by itself, and not have anything to do with the creative process.
Yeah, like if you're consuming and you're just giving out the same information, you're almost reproducing. But being creative to me is producing something new, something that's not already out there. So you've consumed information, but being creative is sparking a new idea with that, not reproducing the same information over and over again.
I would say it's new just based on the fact that it's coming from you and not the same outlet that you consumed it from.
I was just going to say that it's one of those things where, as somebody who has mentored artists and mentored other creatives and things like that, one of the things that comes up often in that space is creatives will say, well, everything's already been done. And they'll defeat themselves. They'll be, or this, this isn't as good as so-and-so, or this isn't, nobody's going to like this. Or
that statement is kind of true, though, that everything has already been done.
I'm not done with it. I agree. Yes. Or that everything. And my response to them is always, but not from your perspective, and not through your voice, your eye, your life experience, because everybody's life experience, which is this kind of beautiful thing, is uniquely them. We all, as a human being, have a unique experience of life, and therefore, by virtue of us, unless we're outright stealing, and imitating, which I have been a reproductive artist, where I've sat down and I have had to reproduce the art of others and make it look identical. So that in that moment, I'm still being creative, but I'm not. I'm copying somebody else. But it's not going to be identical. The brushstrokes are going to be different. The experience of it, probably the way I do it, will still be a little different. People can tell the difference between an original artwork and a reproduced artwork for a number of reasons. So it is actually impossible, except for perhaps in certain cases, like in the case of maybe print, maybe in the case of writing, we can absolutely plagiarize, and it would be hard to tell which was which if we're sitting down and the books are identical, right? Well, this one was written by so-and-so, but this person plagiarized so-and-so's work. And we would probably only know if by the name of the author being different, but otherwise it would be hard to tell that it's been plagiarized. So that's an interesting space to go in. I think, I don't know if there are other mediums where that is the case, but probably digital mediums now. With digital art, we can easily steal.
I mean, I can copy paste. That's it.
Anthony, is ChatGPT creative?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I would say that it is creative,
Yeah.
because you can create, not even though it was trained on things that currently exist, you can use it to create things that currently don't exist.
You can affect it.
New.
Right? You can affect it by your interaction with it, and by virtue of that, I think it becomes it has the capability of being originally creative.
Wait, are you saying that no one can interact with ChatGPT the way you can, therefore whatever you create with it is unique?
Not necessarily. No. I mean, I can interact with it the same way somebody else can.
I would just say it has the possibility, depending on the user, to create new things.
But yes, exactly.
Jen, we should type in the exact same question, you and I, and see if we get the exact same response.
Or with the same prompts and everything. Yeah.
I I would be interested, although I would be guessing that you would not get the same exact response.
That doesn't make sense.
Well, AI, that's the whole purpose is it evolves and learns based on input. So
Now, it would. I mean, it'd be interesting to see. We'll have to test that. We're deviating
What
from our topic.
is creativity?
What is so creativity, creation, creating? There's a really broad definition of that, right? Are we creative when we're going on a walk?
I am. Good God, I get a lot of
Yeah.
ideas when I go on a walk.
yeah, me too. Well,
Here's a thing though, is having ideas
that's a good
you
idea.
being creative.
Yes.
Like if I have a new idea that I arrive at, is that I don't
Yeah, you are. That's you being creative.
I guess
don't-
so.
I don't
I would agree. It just doesn't seem like it at first, but
Because why? Because it feels like the end product
Mm.
has it's you're measuring creativity by the end product.
yeah, it seems like creativity is partly, and I guess what matters really to people about the creative process is what do you do with the ideas or the imagination? Because I can imagine, for example, this I don't know why work came into this, but part of what I do creatively is I got to create new processes and new things and forms. Things need to be made for whatever group registrations we have. I can imagine and I can know 100% in my head what needs to happen, and it's a new novel thing that needs to be created. But just the ideas floating in my head nothing was created yet. I have to actually make something.
The idea was creative, son.
I don't.
So you think about a think tank. Think about a collaborative room. You got a room, a group of people. They're in there. They're coming up with ideas. They're creating plans. That is the purest form of creation because it is not restricted by hows, right? We are throwing things against the wall. We are in a room. We're being creative. Anything is possible. Let's worry about the how we're going to do it later. Let's figure out what we want to do. That is intensely, I would say, one of the purest forms of creation. Now, the second level is the next level of that is, yes, moving into the do, right? Starting to take those puzzle pieces together. But it may not be the thought makers that do the do, right? They might come up with this idea and utilize a team to put it together and oversee it. That doesn't make them any less creative, does it?
That's a good question.
I agree. It could, in some instances, make them even more creative, considering there's some people who might be okay with just putting variables together and moving forward with those variables, but they have no idea how to get those variables. I know this sounds less creative and more, I guess, scientific, but there can be people, I think, that can put together these broad thoughts after, like what you're speaking about, like a think tank, brainstorming session, and there may be those who are, maybe not as analytical and don't have the ability to put those things into motion like you could. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
that makes
It
me
goes
think
both
of like
ways.
the five hats that we talk about, and that
Yeah.
like there's different personalities, and maybe that one personality can't see outside, but the other person who's more detailed, the white hat or different colors.
What kills me too, though, is when you come into contact with somebody and they're like, "Oh, I'm not creative. I'm not a creative person," and I'm like, "Bullshit. Yes, you are. Tell me what you do with your day, and I'll show you how you're creative. Because I guarantee you, we as a human beings, and I believe this, of a lot of animals. Any animal or creature that uses tools, has problem solving skills, really that exists. There's a degree of creativity that goes on, and I think that there's sort of a cliche of creatives means that you're doing art essentially. But I know engineers that are creative. It's people who, as somebody who's produced films, I get surrounded a lot of times by artists, type of humans, and they like don't like getting bogged down in the how it's going to be done. They just want to get in there and, you know, do the fun. But there's an intense amount of creativity that has to happen on a producing side. And that's like putting all these puzzle pieces together and figuring out how everything's going to fit. And I had to adjust my definition of creativity, because I started out as the person who was just going to art, right? But that'll only get you so far. You have to, if you're going to be a successful artist, you either have to have enough money to hire yourself a wonderful team, or you have to at some point start to develop business sense and start to do these things that are not creative feeling, but they are in their own way. And I've learned to redefine creativity.
So if you're not creative, would you recommend consuming?
Now that's where it's interesting, because I've changed a bit in the consuming world as well. I used to, when I would be designing like a maze and it was a specific theme, or writing a story and I wanted it to be, you know, I would deliberately deprive myself of what other people had done, or I would only look at a couple examples and then I would set it aside so that I could hopefully think of something that was different and I wouldn't have too much influence, outside influence.
Yeah.
But I would put on things that were sort of peripherally related, or look at things, you know, have a board in front of me that helped me sort of visualize the direction I wanted to go with it. And then I would take that and create my own version of it. And so it was like a balance of deprivation with inspiration at the same time. But ultimately, I think we all have to have some kind of inspiration when we're trying to come up with something original. And there is an influence. I think it would be remiss to pretend that we weren't influenced by the things around us. And I know there's different schools of thought, and this brings us back to this balance concept of, is it right for us to get so much in the study of what we want to do, where we're consuming every aspect of it, so that way we can create our own original version of it? Is there a point where you can get so bogged down in the learning everything about it that it makes it impossible for you to do something original? I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
No, I think it's still going to be original.
I don't know if it makes it impossible.
Yeah,
either.
the impossibility part's throwing me off.
But just looking back, like, I guess anywhere in art, or like the fine arts, I'm coming at this from like the fine arts, like maybe a literary perspective or a philosophical perspective, people have just been stuck in a system where they're theoretically engaging with whatever it is they're consuming, and they never break out and they never do something that's original or really creative on their own. They're just stuck studying the things that are, you know, what has always been in that time period. So it seems like for some people it is impossible for them to break out of it. Necessarily speaking, though, I don't think that is really the case. I think people just don't want to take the steps to create their own thing because they don't see another way how things could be different, or if they should be different, for one. That might be another thing. When you get into this like this rule-oriented way of thinking about, you know, creativity.
Which is an interesting space. So if we shift our perspective, again, I really wish I'd done more research, to science. Science is something, it's an intensely creative process. But I don't know that it's the first thing that comes to mind when people think about creative processes. But when we talk about, let's say, theory, when it comes to science, yes, but what is science? Science is theory built on top of theory, built on top of theory, right? So built on top of experimentation. So it's ultimately a creative thought process that goes, well, I think that this might be the way of the world or the universe or what have you. And then you go out and you test that. And it decides whether or not, okay, we've proved this. And then the next level happens and the next creative person comes along and builds on that. And it keeps building It's like creativity built on top of creativity, a little like AI, where it's this mountain of knowledge, and no one scientist has full knowledge of the entire mountain, but they have enough knowledge of the facet they are in for them to be able to think creatively and build on top of it. I feel like that is a really cool space when you start to think of science as creativity, because I think it translates to other forms of creativity, and science hasn't bogged themselves down with, we've learned everything, it's all been done, right? And they're not going to. They're constantly, they've got this let's keep learning thought process, let's keep finding out more. And think about how this applies to life coaching for a moment. Thank you. And they don't give up on it. They keep expanding. And I feel like the same thing can happen with regard to any area of knowledge, any area of growth. Anthony, you look like you have a thought.
Yeah, I was. We're talking about like the artistic side of like science. What about I think there's an issue that comes up when people try to make a science out of things that aren't a science, that are more creative processes or non-linear processes, such as building a business. I don't know if you can make a science out of that sort of aspect, because this is what ultimately we're talking about, is like how coaches balance creativity and consumption. And I feel like some people, or a lot of people who start their own businesses, think that it's a science, where if I do things in the right way and there's established rules and laws that I follow, I will get clients and then I will make lots of money. It's actually a more creative process than a scientific process, even though we already established that science is creative.
I dare say there's a mix. And it's the same even with creative processes, right? So if, and forgive the metaphor or analogy here, but if I'm going to sit down and paint a painting, there are certain rules I have to follow for me to actually be painting a painting. I have to have, a paintbrush or a tool. Oh, I have to have paint. I have to have something to paint on.
Yeah, that's kind of implicit in the painting part.
Right?
But
I know.
I thought like being creative, though, was like going outside of the box and like expanding.
Now you're getting into like,
I used to say that don't even acknowledge the box. Like there's no box. Like the moment you think there's a box, you've already lost the game. Lost, right? That's the idea of getting out of the box. Like just don't even acknowledge the box exists.
This also gets into like, what is the medium you are creating in? If you're using painting as your example, you have to have paint involved.
Right, so that's what I mean when I say.
And there's a medium for the paint.
Within business and building a business, there are specific times, specific things that have to happen for it to be a functioning business, right? People have to know that you have a business. You have to, if let's say you've decided you're going to build a virtual platform, you want to build a website. Well, then we have to figure out how to build a website. There's a degree of science to that. There's a degree of science to SEO if you want people to find you. So there's these little processes that will help you be more successful within that overarching creative process. And the same applies to painting, right? There's artists practice their skills. Musicians practice, and they practice scales. They practice base level things so that they can be creative, so that they have that foundation and they are able to be creative within that foundation.
Mind you, the musician doesn't create scales themselves.
No,
they're not trying to start from the like very bottom and create everything by hand. You are able to consume things to your benefit so that you can go on to do actual original things.
And I think the same applies within building a business, right? You're going to consume a lot, decide what you want to do, decide your creative path. It will flex and adjust as you move through it. Some things will work, you'll experiment, and you're going to see what works and what doesn't for you personally. And that's what makes it less linear, right? I think one of the things people don't realize, as somebody who has done marketing, how creative marketing is, and how much of marketing is test, fail, succeed, go this route. Test, fail, like it's a concept it's built in. There's A/B
Which
testing.
it becomes a science when you
It
start doing that.
Yes, it does. But what do? We create 2 headlines. We run an ad. Let's see which ones work better. Okay, these ones aren't running. Get rid of these. We're going to run this route. And you keep doing that. And it's a constant adjustment because people change. Your customer is going to change. They're human beings. And so you have to be constantly evolving with your customer, and your customer is a person. So they're going to keep evolving. So it's an interesting process where it cracks me up when you hear what is the right way.
Yeah.
Well, it's different for everybody because some things are really going to work for you and your clients. Some things are not. And you're the one that's going to have to discover that, and you're going to have to do it your own way. There are ways you can assist yourself along the way. And some people who have done the science, if we go back to our science analogy, you can build upon the successes of others, learn from them, and then come up with your own thing and add to that. So there's this balance, and it's coming up with this consuming versus creating, this balance of science and art and process and how linked they are. It always cracks me up when creative people go, I can't business. I can't. It's like, are you kidding me? If you embrace that side of yourself, do you know how successful you would be? Because by virtue of you being able to be creative means you are capable of doing that. You just are putting up a giant block for yourself right now. Sorry. As somebody who's dealt with a lot of creative people and gotten very frustrated with them when they're like, I can't. It's like, no, you won't. So.
So if a coach is wanting to find balance between consumption and creating, I mean, what are the best practices for that based on our research?
Let's talk a
Or
little
based
bit.
on Brooke's guesses.
Yeah, based on our research, Brooke, which you
Before-
didn't do.
Before we go into this concept of let's talk about how a coach is consuming. Let's talk about the different ways our coaches are consuming versus creating. So, because we have consuming knowledge, training, what we do, what we offer, that we're a lot of our coaches come into this and they're hungry to consume, right? That's why they're taking our classes. When does that process shift from consuming to creating? I'm curious, in your opinion.
Well, we do that in the first day of class. For one, they consume they get a lecture, they follow the slides, the facilitator's teaching them, and then in the class they have to creatively start coaching. They need to coach the other students and apply what they have just consumed. Because
And
if it was
they even
all
at the end
consumption,
have to submit like a Facebook post and try to find a friend too, somebody outside. So they need to use that creativity, not with just the same training cap, you know.
But that's where, like, for coaches at least who take our class, that is the first probably consumption and then creative like cycle.
I think it happens even before class when we give them the life wheel. We give them the tools that a coach can use, and they start to have to think and right. We start to initiate those creative processes. So let's talk about. I mean, that's what can happen. I'm going to pause, and I know we're going to go here naturally, but just going to say let's pump the brakes for a moment on the actual coaching process, and let's stick in the education process for a moment. Because I did just watch a lecture on the idea of performance versus presence, and this is kind of a similar feeling for me here. So we as coaches, a lot of our coaches are trying to consume this knowledge. I want to be a good coach. I want to ask the right questions. I want to learn as much as I can so that I can feel like I'm not going to do harm. I'm going to be successful in my coaching. I think this is an important topic for those people because they get stuck in a consuming space and get afraid to pull the trigger and go into the coaching space, which I dare say is a very creative space. But before we talk about that coaching space, how do we help those coaches who are stuck just consuming all this coaching material, but not putting it into practice?
How are they applying what they're learning? How are they integrating it? How are they incorporating it? How are they practicing it? That would be my first question, is how are you actually utilizing the new information?
How
So
do you
yeah, go ahead, Jerome.
so how do you know what you know works? And if you keep attempting to just know and know and know, I don't think you're gonna know the most important question, which is, does what I know work in practice? So the
So
only
that
way to figure that out is to go and practice.
so that becomes important in our consumption cycle here, right? Is that at some point you have to start practicing it.
Absolutely.
Why?
Because that's how you're going to integrate it. That's how you're going to fully know it. That's how you're going to be able to embody it.
It's pretty much where theory meets praxis. If you want to get like uber technical with it, you could theoretically know how to do something, but until you actually attempt to do it yourself, you're going to start to see the gaps in your knowledge. But it requires, for one, you need to also know how to evaluate it or have somebody else evaluate you, because you might not even know what you don't know, which is why, and I've said this before, we don't help you by suggesting what to do in class. We tell you you are coaching this other student and there's going to be a facilitator who's watching and observing you. And then, later on in the process, maybe you'll get a mentor coach who will do those observations for you. But at a certain point, when you're a beginner in any creative process, I don't even think you have enough knowledge or consumption of knowledge to even start evaluating yourself. At a certain point, you probably will have enough knowledge where you can start self-evaluating. But at some point, you have to actually do something that requires active creativity rather than all this theoretical stuff in your head.
Right.
It's the do becomes important, right? And I think that was a great point. We can read about how to do something all day, but we really don't know how to do it until we try it ourselves, which is so funny, right? Like, I think there's a hubris that happens at us people that like we think, oh, I've read about it, I know, I got it. Sometimes, and then when they go out and try it, fall on their faces, right? Yeah. And that's where that nuance is. I think there's also a piece that comes in as well. If we're going to make it a unique creation, we have to do it ourselves. Mm-hmm. Right? Or we have to, when we're just consuming, it's not expressed uniquely until a different person starts to do something with it. Yeah. And that's when that unique expression begins. Mm-hmm.
You can know all the knowledge in the world, and if your end result is to pass a multiple choice test, then I guess you don't have to go out and practice and apply your knowledge because you know. But when it comes to projects and real things in life, like life coaching, there is that requirement, I think, of putting your knowledge to practice.
What's interesting, so there's like in medicine, there's this when you're learning in medicine, it's watch one, do one, teach one. So like there's like another step in their learning process, and I kind of agree with it, because I think that it's one thing to watch something, it's another thing to get in and do it, and then it's a whole other thing to teach somebody else how to do it, right? And so it's like this other level of like passing on your creativity, and I think that's something so beautiful and reciprocal about that, and symbiotic, where I learn something, I learn how to do it, and then I teach somebody else how to do it so they can do it. And it's like this butterfly effect. And I think it's beautiful. And I love that extra piece in the creative process. Not just doing it, but also then passing that knowledge on to somebody else so it can continue to be done, and done uniquely in a different way. So beautiful. I love that.
So what would that look like for a coach? Is it like doing the life wheel, getting coached, learning, awareness, and shift, and then teaching that to someone else.
Coaching somebody.
Or using the tool, finding the best time to incorporate those and practicing it, and saying, yes, this tool is more powerful, and actually, as Brooke was saying, like teaching it yourself. You're the one that's actually owning it rather than just listening. This is the life wheel and how to use it. Now you're incorporating it, and that becomes your creative coach that's taking it to the next step.
You know, we say the life wheel. We have our version of life wheel. Do you know how many ways the life wheel has been adopted? They have it in yoga. They have a version of the life wheel. It's based around chakras. So so you can go, but it's unique and used and so special to that yoga community, right? So everything has been done, but it's been changed and moved and adapted in a way that uniquely serves a group of people that needs it, and that's super neat. And I love, and I think that's also that teach one as well. Since we're running out of time, let's bring this into the coaching container, because I can imagine, and I know this for a fact, we have people that come into this coaching space, they learn from us, and we say, you do not get to fix. We take that away from them. You do not get to advise. You are a mirror, and you are there as a safe space. I could see, and I've seen it. We've seen those well, what value do I have? How am I being creative as a coach in the coaching process? If it's all in my client.
The questions that you ask are going to be, they're coming from a combination of your experience, your intuition. I mean, nobody is going to have that same ability. There's no one on the planet that can coach like you, truly.
I think it takes immense creativity to be a really good coach because of that fact. You're not just going through the same process over and over again. You're creating new ways of asking questions, new ways of presenting your question, and ultimately giving your client different results, because it's going to take time, to get through certain processes with your client. So being able to be creative and ask certain questions in a different perspective that shifts your client's mind is going to be, again, I think what makes up a really, really great coach.
I think intuitively, once we know we're not giving advice, it becomes very intuitive that the coach is consuming, and less intuitive that they are creating. I think but what we talked a little bit, I think as the client, it becomes very clear that they are creating in that space. How is the client consuming in the coaching container?
I mean, they have to respond to the questions that you ask them, and they have to consider maybe another perspective on their life and their situation, which requires that they analyze certain things that maybe they haven't analyzed before, which it might be a form of consumption. They have to take in sort of what they said, and then later go apply it. To be the creative aspect. They get to create their solutions outside of the coaching session and actually implement them inside the coaching session. The conversation that is being created, they have to consume that and then do something with it. Because otherwise, you're just having a conversation with someone for an hour a week. They're consuming something, they're consuming it, but they're not doing anything creative in terms of what they want to be coached on.
So how are they consuming?
The conversation that is happening between the coach and the client, they have to consume that and internalize what is being said, and then go do something outside of the coaching session that is creative.
Okay.
Otherwise, if they don't do that, they're just consuming a coaching session and having a little conversation, but it's not having any meaningful impact on their life.
They might as well just have Family Guy on the background because they're mindlessly consuming.
There you go. Your Family Guy. Your Peter.
And that just proves that, Anthony, you can mindlessly consume. You had it in your own example.
No. It doesn't. I disagree.
So Is it possible for our client to mindlessly consume in a coaching space?
Keep going.
Yes, if they're not fully present, if the client immediately starts the session with saying that they're distracted or something like that, you check in with them and make sure that it's a good time to coach. If it's not a good time to coach, you don't coach, because they need to be present with you.
I think within this balancing consumption and creativity, I think it's a really valid point for us to drive home. And it's something we say. Our clients may not have aha, crazy breakthrough moments while sitting in that coaching container, but think about when you all are most creative, like coming up with ideas creative. Where are you typically?
In the shower or on a walk?
Theta states. We're kind of talking theta states, right? A little bit here. We start to get into our theta states.
I was going to say when I'm trying to solve a problem.
But you're typically by yourself, right?
Yes.
Typically for me, right before I'm going to bed.
Which is good and bad, Kyle. It's good and bad. It makes it hard to sleep.
I
Can I say, while I am sleeping, honestly, I am by myself, and my dreams, especially as of recent, have been really crazy creative. They reflect back on some of the things that are occurring in my life too, which is great. It sucks when you forget what the heck happens in them 2 minutes after you wake up. I need to really start. I need to start writing down. because a lot of creativity comes to me in my sleep as of recent.
But so what's interesting is when we talk about these creative moments, because I agree, driving sometimes is a really creative time for me. It's usually when we're able to let go of outside consumption distraction and just sort of come into our heads and allow that theta state to happen, allow those processes to start to connect and fire, and that happens a lot of times. It can't happen collaboratively, but it can't happen a lot of times when we're on our own. And so to those coaches who are like, man, I don't know that my client really got much out of that. Well, they probably did. And it's probably going to happen without you there. It's probably going to happen while they're showering, driving, and they're out attempting to do the do, and they're going to find those pieces and start to connect them together. So we as a coach can just be okay with facilitating sort of some kind of thought process that may not have otherwise happened, that happens without us being present, without us being right there. In fact, I would dare say that most of the work happens outside of the coaching container, right? And that's okay. It's don't beat yourself up for that. We're coming towards our close. You all look like you're spent. What are your final thoughts?
Kyle's been in class all day. That's why he's
Kyle's tie-tie.
My dog's ready for a walk, is what she is. You might hear some cries. But my final thoughts, this whole conversation regarding this topic of consuming creativity and balance. And Brooke, you mentioned it a lot, but it's also like a process. You need to consume to maybe come up with an idea and be creative. And once you're creative, that generates inspiration and it kind of restarts. Once you're inspired, you're then wanting to consume more. And it's this like process of doing it, but there is that balance in doing it. You can't overly consume, like the metaphor I think Dan mentions, or rearranging the chairs on the deck of the Titanic when it's going down. You can't overly be consuming if you can't actually put it into practice and learn and fail from it and create even more after that. So those are my final thoughts.
Mine is that creativity is wasted on those who don't create. You can only be a creative person if you actually take the time to bring into the world whatever is in your imagination or what you sort of synthesized and consumed. So you just have to get out there and start doing it. And then you're going to learn from the process too.
And I'm going to piggyback a little bit on top of that. And when we're just consuming, I think we're in a more selfish space. And when we're starting to create, it can also be a very selfish process. But I think what happens is that in my perfect world, right? So in Brooke Adair Walter's perfect world, at some point we begin to create something for people outside of ourselves, for to help others, to help sort of the world become a better place, see it in a different way, whatever it may be. And then I think the way to even take this creative and consuming process and make it even more unselfish or benevolent is to pass that on to others. So teaching others to be creative and to embrace their creativity and to run with it. Creativity is something that is so close to my heart. I love it, and I want the whole world to realize they are creative and capable of making the world a better place, a more beautiful place. And it takes creativity to do that, but we also have to take that moment and be unselfish and share that with other people. So if you're not expressing your creativity to others, if you're keeping it all in for yourself and you're too scared to put it out there, you're being selfish. Stop it. Put it out there and share it with the world, please. We want it. That's all. Jen?
My final thought on this for balance is that just like with most things in life, there is a point of diminishing returns. And so with consumption comes inspiration. Well, you got to act on that inspiration. Create when you're inspired. Don't seek more inspiration. Don't just layer inspiration on top of inspiration, because that's when you're hitting that point of diminishing returns. You're not actually creating from the inspiration. So just pay attention to that. And that's how you'll find balance.
Don't be overly critical either. Sometimes you just got to start throwing paint on the wall and not worrying about how pretty it is.
Throw paint on the wall and give yourself permission to call it art. Because if you don't do it, somebody else will.
Jerome?
Well, I don't know what more I could say that you guys haven't, but I will say, I think what I got out of this conversation, I think the most important part to me is understanding your process of creativity, your process of creation. I think that's the most important part when it comes to being creative, and not the creation itself, because I'm always, I'd like to think that, everybody they're going to have a different opinion on everything. Anything that you create, someone's going to have a different opinion as the next person does. I'm going to go create right now and fix some steaks, and hopefully they come out good. But if I sat around and just watched YouTube videos, which I do, as to, how to make some good steaks all day and never went out there and did it, then I would never enjoy a good steak. So I think me tapping into my creative process now, I want to go ahead and go down there and possibly fail, hopefully succeed and have a good steak tonight. So
eat the steak.
So bad.
Consume that
food
steak.
poisoning.
And you know what? You're watching YouTube videos on how to make steaks. So look at you. Somebody is teaching you with their creativity. Now you're going to implement it. We're continuing this beautiful cycle of creation. I love it.
Film it, put it on TikTok so other people can learn.
So other people can do the same and eat it. Eat that steak. Awesome. So Jen, why don't you sign us off?
Yes. What's our sign off here?
Be creative with it.
We've got our 3-day intensives. They're amazing. You get certified in 3 days. You get master certified in 6 days. Come join us if you haven't. Come check us out. CertifiedLifeCoachInstitute.com, or you can call the office. You can talk to me. You can talk to Jerome. You can talk to Anthony. You can talk to Brooke. Kyle doesn't answer.
You actually don't talk to me.
Talk to me in class.
If you bug us hard enough, you might.
Yeah, you can talk to Kyle in class.
You can talk to Kyle in class. Yes, you would have to go to class to be with Kyle.
Yeah, he's behind a paywall.
And make sure that you share this if you find someone else needs some creativity inspiration. And like and subscribe and all the good stuff, and we'll be back next week. I won't be here. I will be on vacay, but everyone else will be here. Lisa will be back
Yes.
at 4 p.m. Pacific.
Woohoo! See you
I
next week. And it's Labor Day weekend this weekend. So those of you in the United States, have a great Labor Day weekend.
Oh, you know what? We won't be here next week then. We won't be here.
Oh, yep, we'll be off Tuesday.
We'll be off.
We're up Tuesday.
We're
So-
off on the 5th. Yep.
Great that you brought that up, Brooke. Yep.
yeah,
Sorry.
Yes.
I forgot we did this nice thing and gave our employees an extra day off on these holiday weekends so we could have 4-day weekends.
Why the hell would we do that?
The pool opened back up. I get to go swimming.
We like
So nice.
we like us our people to get rest now and again, maybe. So
So 2 weeks. We'll be back in 2 weeks.
yep. Awesome
It
sauce.
is the big sad.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Have an amazing weekend. Or week. I don't even know what day it is.
And
See you next month.
Bye. See you
Bye.
next- Oh, next week. It's already too late. We're fine. We'll be discussing more balance.